don't consider that I work that hard, even though, yeah, it's probably a lot more than 8 hours a day. But it doesn't seem hard because I'm doing it because I want to. Nobody's telling me I have to, right?
Yeah, it's funny you'd say it, because at the very end of SDMG is when I kind of fell in love of being in marketing. That's actually, it was a low point. The only time I was like, I've always loved marketing, and I think I was just like tired of the business, like dealing with employees, and that's where you were like this. I think both of us didn't want to operate the business anymore at that point in time. That's when we brought a partner in, and I totally shifted out on cat skiing, content marketing, film. I was really inspired by that. But I think at that time, that's when I was like kind of not doing it at the very, very end, and was really happy that we sold the business. And then I shifted to working in film production, thinking that's maybe a direction I want to go, only to realize I'm an entrepreneur. I do want to work for other people, and I love marketing. Aloha, and welcome to another episode of the Groundswell Marketing Podcast, where I connect you to outstanding humans and sustainable ideas. I'm your host, Scott Martin. And if you're listening to this, hopefully you're listening to part one, which was the previous episode. If not, go back, listen to part one. This is the second half of an incredible, long 2-hour dialogue between Mike Allan, my former business partner. We own an agency called Strategic Marketing Group, and we talk about some of the stories and some of the unbelievable untold stories that we haven't really shared with anybody. And it's absolutely hilarious. And Mike is chock full of just incredible insights. He was someone who I deeply respect and learned so much from over the years. And I think you're just going to absolutely enjoy this second half. We kind of go even deeper in the deep end, so if that's even possible. So without further ado, let's paddle in.
Yeah, and mine is similar, like maybe sort of the opposite side of the coin, but it's, I was still in empire building mode, and I was like looking to expand and grow and build something bigger. And I like that part. Like I like having, a large team and lots of moving parts and stuff. Right now, I'm probably going to eventually get to the point where I won't want that part of it either. But we've got a pretty deep team that can, the succession plan part's going to be pretty easy, I think. But I mean, you're the same as me. I think like I'm never going to do nothing. I don't even, people always, that's the other question you always get asked, right? Everyone assumes you're rich when you have a company that's doing well, which is usually far from the case.
You're last to get paid.
Yeah, you're thinking, I've joked a couple times with people, like I'm hoping that this will be the year that I put less in than I take out in salary. And maybe one day that will happen. But, I don't really care about that stuff. I'm still looking to build something that didn't exist before, and I'm still looking to expand it. And if I quit today, if I won the lottery tomorrow, I wouldn't retire. I would probably, if I won $20,000, I'd just go, well, maybe I'll put $1 million aside and I'll just take the rest and put it into a couple of new different interesting things that I want to do. I don't foresee a time when I'll actually retire. I just don't think it will ever happen.
Yeah, I view Groundswell as my life business.
Yeah, and it's I think of myself as not being in any discipline. Like when you're talking about marketing and stuff, I kind of obviously went away from the marketing agency kind of approach. But now, we have 6 people on our marketing team. We have a bunch of, pretty decent film and video gear. We're creating content 4 or 5 times a week. So we've kept the pieces that we liked and just jettisoned the other one. It's kind of always an evolution, but I don't really think of myself as in one industry or another. I'm just whatever I feel like incorporating at the time, I'll do that. And then
I think that's what fuels you, because you love like this is a new industry. Awesome. I want to learn about it. Like, so you, and for me, I do from a marketing and business standpoint. And I'd say it's like marketing meets business meets entrepreneur. That's where I'm at. It's not just marketing, but I like marketing. That's where I'm fascinated with continuing the science of it. But you have so much talent in the business, the programming, the creative, like you're rare. Like, you're a really talented, like, I've seen you in so many different situations, being able to like be able to adapt and inquire and be so curious about everything from, I mean, you were talking solar energy to me, I think, at one point, and then you're doing logistics stuff. So I can't even keep up with the stuff that you can keep in your brain. It's crazy.
Well,
But that's what fuels you, right?
yeah, and I mean, I know my weaknesses, right? Like I do kind of feel like, I have that strength of being able to take a blank. We always used to say, right, when we're hiring someone, we want someone who can take a blank piece of paper and put something on it. That was my number one arbiter and still is of hiring a person. I don't really want someone who can follow a plan really well or the rules really well. I want someone who can write it. I want someone who everyone who comes in owns their little piece of the business as if it entirely belongs to them, because effectively it does, right? You own that piece, and if it goes well, your part of the business grows, and if it doesn't, it may be under new ownership, right? And so I've always been, I think, a pretty good starter, but I know my limits. I'm not a good finisher, and that's why I need people to, sort of take up the charge from the really good conceptualization stage and then make it a real thing. Eric, actually, who's our COO now, he had the best analogy. Somebody in one of our customers asked him what his role is, and he said something about, imagine Mike is a miner. He's just trying to make depth. Every day he's drilling, blasting. He doesn't really care about anything else. He just wants to make depth. And I come in with the lights and the canaries and the timber, and I shore everything up so it doesn't collapse and kill us all. And the guy, actually, I forget who it was, but he said, that's the best analogy for a COO I've ever heard. I'm going to steal that. And I'm like, that's totally what it is, right? Like, I feel like I'm not going to make depth if I have to worry about safety and security. But if we don't have people who worry about that, the platform's not going to be safe and secure, right? So entire people's jobs are the opposite of me. It's like, let's not rock the boat. Let's not mess anything up. Let's test it quadruple times, all that sort of stuff. That's not me. But we have people that do that. And that's, I think, why I like my job so much, is because there's people that thrive on that. They love that sort. How can I make it as safe as possible? How can I make it secure as possible? Lawyers, for the most part, a lawyer's job is to do nothing. A corporate lawyer, you and I have remember that from our those SDMG days. Like, the lawyer's job is to get nothing done. They've done their job if they kill the project, because their job is to minimize risk, and the easiest way to minimize risk is to not do it. So
yeah, they're them, and then the classic saboteur. Mm-hmm. That's something I learned from us. There's always one in every project. They don't surface sometimes. Sometimes they're obvious, but there's always a saboteur. And knowing how to neutralize that before they get you, that's to me has happened over and over and over again. Absolutely. It's usually someone internal that's threatened or something.
Yeah, and getting to know that person's, what makes them tick is the key, right? Because you have to. And actually, again, I couldn't name any names, but even in our current iteration, I can point to probably 4 or 5 clients where that person is now, if not our biggest, one of our biggest champions, because we kind of took them aside and said, okay, what, tell me more about this, right? Because clearly your objections that you're voicing loudly in the meeting so no one else can talk are not the real ones. So why don't you tell me the real ones? And then you get to the bottom of what it actually is, right? And it's usually, like you said, some kind of fear or nervousness about something that they're going to lose some sort of control. They're not going to be able to sort of get with the new program, and they're going to be looking in from the outside. And then once you get over that with them, they all of a sudden, because they don't like change, once you convince them that the change makes sense, then
it's going to help them.
Yeah, now the change is the status quo, and they don't want to get rid of that. So they all of a sudden become really resistant to anything different other than what they've already been convinced is the right way to go. And I really find that, like, most of those people, if you can turn them around, are your biggest champions.
what I see in businesses mistake is they tend to try to oversell to that person or reiterate what they've already sold, and it doesn't work on that person. In fact, it creates a bigger wall instead of trying to understand their position and recalibrate what it is you're doing, and even have to adjust what you want to do to go, hey, well, let's make sure we include that as part of the requirements. Like, to me, that is what moves that needle. I think because my mistake has been, I don't know when, but prior to us learning this lesson has been, oh, I think we just didn't sell well enough. I didn't sell them enough, and that did not work.
Well, and the what did we call it again? The pushback strategy, right?
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's classic. Let's talk about pushback. This is like a really good strategy. It's worked for us over and again.
totally. And I just used it the other day. Again, I'm not going to say on who. But I'm thinking of one of the tourism clients again, where the room absolutely lit up. Everybody loved us, except for one guy. Absolutely, we were not getting that job because of the guy. He hated us. And
Arms folded.
yeah, and he actually hated us until probably a year after we got that job. Like we had to basically sort of succeed despite him, and then we kind of finally figured out what made him tick, and all of a sudden he was a huge champion. But yeah, he literally was so frumpy in the initial meetings that we're going, okay, well, the CEO and all the senior management and everybody except for this one guy loves us, and we're still guaranteed not getting this job because he was so resistant. And it turned out he was more of a traditional guy. And some of those things you mentioned before, like, presenting to him in a traditional way, having traditional media components to some of the digital things that we were doing, and then playing nice with their traditional agency, all of a sudden kind of won him over that, well, they're not trying to replace me. And then we realized, like, instead of hating him, we had empathy for him. And we went, like, he's
fearful.
He's an older dog who doesn't really want to learn new tricks. And we made him look good, but we didn't sort of condescend to him or badmouth his part of the business. We just said, well, here's how we think we can help do what you want to do and also make it better. And there was a number of those ones we did that with.
Yes, and usually they're threatened because it's something they don't understand.
Yeah.
And when someone feels like they can't keep up with what you're saying, then sometimes it's not that they're resistant to it, they're fearful. So they're going to push back because they don't want to be exposed, if for less of a better explanation, So I've tried to really tamp down my market speaking gobbledygook for that very reason, because it doesn't serve.
Well, and you used to do that really well with the pushback strategy, as I remember it, is like, well, why should I hire you guys? I don't know. Why would you? Right? Well, you guys are really small. Yeah. I mean, I remember, again, going back to Levity in the States, they actually said, there's no possible way that you guys with the size team you have could do this. Explain yourselves. How could you showing us all this work you've done? We don't believe it. And we're like, yeah, I wouldn't believe it either. Like, here's some clients you can call, talk to them. And he said, how is it possible that you're, getting this stuff done with teams 1/4 the size? And I said, I don't know, maybe we're 4 times better. I can't tell you that, right? That's not my job to tell you that. Let the customers tell you. If you can find anyone who doesn't say we're the shit, don't hire us. And so we just took away their objections by going, yeah, we agree. There's no reason why you should believe us. I'm not going to try to.
It's like a keto. It's like you use your energy in the direction for instead of pushing against them, power to power is just move with them. And when you've delivered over and over again to your clients, and that you have that, that's why we were confident. Is that's your best source of pushback you can give? Is go, don't believe me, go talk to my clients.
Totally. And it worked in so many different ways. It was always just whatever they asked you, they're like, convince me. And you'd go, no. And I'm not going to convince you. If you're not convinced, maybe we're not right for you. And then they would all of a sudden start going, what do you mean by that? Like, you guys have everything.
They start reaching for you. Yeah.
And they start telling you all the reasons why they
you can't leave. We've invested time with you. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I mean, really?
Yeah, no, it's totally true. I use it every day. And people, some of our team jokes that, they always say, like, you freak out about the smallest things, meaning like I don't yell. I'm not a yeller, but one little thing happens and you want to immediately jump on it and correct it, but some big disaster befalls us and you're the calmest person in the room, right? And I'm like, yeah, because the little thing could have been prevented. I want to make sure that doesn't happen again. The big thing, the external thing that has nothing to do with us, what is the point of getting all bent out of shape about that? Let's just roll with whatever the next thing that comes is, right? Like you can't, if you lose a client from no fault of your own, if the company goes under, everyone's running around going, oh my God, what are we going to do? And I'm like, well, it's done now. There's no point worrying about it. Let's move on to the next thing. But if we've screwed up, like if I've screwed up or someone else has, I'm like, well, let's talk about that, because that's something that could be fixed in the future. But
yeah. And I think a lot of people get really emotional and they don't also just like, I think guiding with so much common sense and being rational in those situations. And it sounds easy just for me to just tout that and say it, but it's hard to do in the moment. But I saw that time and again. That's got us out of quite a few pinches and really been able to get right to the heart of what the problem is. Otherwise, it just very quickly can, people get over upset by it, and then you have a consequence that is really unintended.
Yeah, well, one of my favorite stories, it might not be yours because you were on the other end of it, but one of the political candidates that we dealt with at one point, who shall not be named.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, we sat down for a meeting, and we went to a coffee shop, a neutral space, with his team, his sort of political team, and and the two of us. And he was just grinding us on price and saying, I can get this for half the price. And I was going, yeah, I'm sure you can. And he's like, there's 20 agencies in town who want this job. Yeah, there is. Like, go to them. Why are you still sitting here talking to us, right? And I was not snippy, but I was getting a little bit flustered. And he said, tell me how you can justify the price you're charging me. And I said, because we can get it. And he's like, well, that's not an excuse. And I said, yes, it is. That's everyone's like BMW charges what they charge because they can get it. Ferrari charges what they can charge because they can get it. If someone's willing to pay you for it, why would you do the same work for someone who is willing to pay 1/3 of that? The market dictates the price. Maybe those guys are just bad at selling themselves. Maybe they're not as good as us. I don't know, but I don't care because I can get it. And then I got up and walked out and left you there with them. And then you said, well, I guess we're not doing this job. And then we went back to the office. And then about half an hour later, they came with the deposit check for the entire amount.
Yes, I remember that fondly. Like that's like one of those like epic, like, but there's one's even bigger than that. So the one that was even bigger than that. I know anyone is listening. This is so crazy. So we were pitching in LA and we had won the business, or so we thought. Do you remember this? Like,
yes, I totally do. I tell this story all the time.
Okay. So you're better at explaining this whole story, because this is huge for us. We're in LA. We've been working on this demo or something. I can't remember exactly what we're doing. The ticketing system for joke shops or something.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had another working. This thing was already sold before we got there. Basically, the pitch was, they've already seen it. They already knew they wanted it. The two champions that we were working with internally, had already essentially said, this is the one we want to go with. And there was two other companies, I think, that were bidding that were pre-can systems. They were like out of the box doing part of what they needed. Ours was custom again. So that was the issue we were always fighting, was something that exists versus something that does exactly what you want. But yeah, we did the pitch. And then we went back to the Santa Monica Pier to celebrate because we thought we nailed it.
Yeah, because they awarded it to us.
Well, no, if you remember right, we thought we killed it. Like, we thought we nailed it, and we patted each other on the back, and then we went and had like 5 drinks because we thought we're done for the day.
Right. Yeah, we won the pier. We were like celebrating having lobster and shit. Okay.
And we hit it probably pretty hard because we thought we were done until, we thought we might hear back the next day or maybe the day after, and we were finished. So we went to the pier. We were going to go to the
done for the day.
It was like 30 degrees out, so the drinks hit us pretty hard. And then they called you and said, guys, come back. We want to give you the job and we want to celebrate with you. Because I remember vividly, you were like, okay, here's the thing. We've had a few drinks. And he goes, come back anyway. And you're like, no, like a few, right? Like, I don't think it's appropriate. And he goes, even better. We're in celebration mode. Come back right now. So we actually got back in the cab, like half cut, and went back to the meeting knowing full well, or them knowing full well that that was the situation. But they were, basically awarded us the job when we got back there. There's a whole gunpoint story in between. I don't know if you want to tell that crazy bit of it. But,
gunpoint?
Do you remember the cab driver that picked us up was like, he was all over the road, swerving, driving. We got pulled over on I think it was like the Santa Monica Freeway or whatever it is. And we could see Century City. We could see where we were going. And we got pulled over by the cops. And you were on the phone talking to Darren or somebody saying, we're trying to come back, but we're getting pulled over by the police. And they pulled their guns, like, they do that thing in the States.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going, dude, get off the phone. They've got their guns out. And you were like, just a second. I'm just finishing up with Darren. And then they let us
Apparently,
out.
I hadn't watched any shows about being taken out on the phone. So.
Totally, yeah. No, that was like probably the craziest adventure ever. For like, it had everything. It had cops and robbers and
okay. So we get out of the cab. We end up going to the meeting, right?
Yeah.
Thinking we're winning this job, right?
Yeah.
And then we think we're about to, basically just talk details, and then things turn sideways.
Yeah, but if I might remember it wrong. I thought that meeting was all about awarding us the job, and then the subsequent meeting was that one IT guy that decided that he was going to.
Oh, so we went there, we won the job, and then we came back the next day, and then we were. Is that right?
Yes, that's how I remember it. I remember. But yeah. I think that afternoon was all celebrating. And it was a done deal. We were going forward. They were going to get all the paperwork drawn up. And then that was when the consultant of a consultant guy decided that he was going to throw some resistance in there and then just basically kind of ground the process to a halt. And if I remember, they never did it. I don't think they ever did the project at all.
And I actually went into business with Darren. Did you know about this?
I think so. Yeah, you guys were doing the film thing or something, right?
Yeah, I became partners in a film marketing company out of LA with Circus. We called it Indie Popcorn Marketing. So he told me the whole backstory of this, which was he was enraged by the fact that this guy came in because he was saying, "Yeah, these guys are great all along," and then he totally torpedoed us the minute we left, and ended up we found out after the fact that he had ended up wasting so much money for them, and he basically drained them dry and tried to bring in his own guys, and they ended up completing nothing. And they all lamented about the day that they let us go and listen to this idiot. Mm-hmm. And so Darren told me the story that we were infamous, like we were like the story they told about how they identify who they want to work with and stuff like that. But I was like, why didn't you just call us? And he's like, he didn't have an answer. I think it was like shame,
I think a lot of it just got away from them, right? Like that happens quite often where someone casts some sort of doubt on something or other, goes, we need to go back to formula, we need to rethink this, and then it never happens. I never mind losing those jobs when they didn't go ahead in the first place. I hate losing, but if it never happened, there was really nothing to lose, right? That guy, the other funny part, I don't know if you remember this part, but we met so there was the guy who sort of submarined everything. There was the other guy he worked with, and we met him in New York at AdTech, and we had breakfast with him. I don't know if you remember that story, but we had breakfast in a little cafe. And New Yorkers are, infamous for dishing it out as good as they can take it. But the server was lovely. She was just wonderful. And we had like this really nice breakfast in this cool cafe. And the guy freaked out on her. And that was like, okay, we both left that thing going, we're Canadian.
We're never working with you.
We can't work with this guy. And I actually went back, left her $20 on the table. And I had to do it stealthily because he was adamant that he didn't even want to pay the bill, and she did nothing wrong. And I was like, okay, this is not that, go back to point A of like, I want to be happy and I want to work with people who make me happy. And I was like, yeah, I think we both said,
I think he was dumbfounded that we said, no, we're not doing business with you. We're just done.
It's just,
like it was a big deal it was for us. It would have been a big deal. And he had felt like he had all the cards, but we're just like, no, our values are way too different. No, thanks.
You don't, like our shop is a no yelling zone, right? I mean, we don't do that. Like you don't do it to each other, or I don't do it to anyone. No one, it's just not a thing that would ever fly here. And so you meet someone like that and it reminded me of a scene out of a movie, because we were like, oh, these guys seem great. And then it was literally the way he treated the server that made me go, there's nothing we could do together here. This is not the kind of person that, will suit us well. And another sort of interesting anecdote like that, again, without naming any names, is, you and I never wore suits, right? We always dressed nice. We always dressed, I would say, sort of like business casual, but never suits. And rarely, if we put a jacket on, we were probably in trouble with someone. And we had that one client who basically had a uniform. It was like the Thurston.
And they've had name tags and stuff.
Yeah, they wore at their desks. And I think our account manager at the time warned us that we better up our game and throw on some yachting jackets with cufflinks. And we said no. And they actually specifically called us out for not doing that, and that being one of the reasons why we couldn't work together. And she was horrified, because she was young and she really wanted us to do well, and she wanted us to get the client. We were like, they would have fired us anyway. If they expect us to dress in suits,
I think about the no yelling. I think about the one.
They're not
in 10 years of you and I working together, we got in one fight.
Yeah,
and I remember. So this, I haven't told you this story. So at the time, I was doing some of this really crazy diet. And I got in this stupid argument with Mike, and I was like really like over the top, and Mike's like, you're being super clear, like, dude, it's this diet. You're like, and I'm like, no, it's not. It's this issue, and I'm like totally just, and we ended up recovering from it, but it's the only time, and up to that moment, I literally thought I was just the issue or whatever. It wasn't the diet. I ended up doing that diet again. And I had the same thing happen. I'm like, oh, shit.
Oh, man.
What's the diet? I was just being an asshole because I had no sugar in my body or something. I can't remember what it was. But do you remember this?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's people have to remember that everybody's got their own thing going on that's, bigger than work. Right. And we had a person, my current business partner, we had a person that used to work for him. And she came in just guns a-blazing one day. I was sitting in the boardroom, and she was just in my face shrieking at me. And she was a shrieker. Like, that was kind of her thing. And I literally just backed up and went, what's really wrong? And she's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, stop. What's really wrong? And she just started sobbing. And then it was all personal stuff, like everything about it after that. And she was a shrieker. That was kind of her default setting, and she never yelled at me ever again. I think she just realized that in that case, that it was a personal thing, that she was taking out on me, and that I was empathetic and I listened. But it was weird because she still did it to everybody else. But that's kind of
maybe between the two of you now.
Yeah, I just try to remember that, right? Like that it's if people are acting out of sorts or I am, you're not. No one's necessarily as good at doing it for themselves, but you're like, why is that, right? Like maybe there's something that I don't know about, and you always kind of tend to think of everybody at work as a work colleague, and you sort of forget that, like, if I was hanging out with this person every day, I would probably, we'd be friends more so than work colleagues. And I would actually be going, hey, tell me what's going on with your family. But it's not really appropriate to do that with work people, unless, they come and ask for advice. So, but sometimes you have to. Like I've actually had that conversation with a few people, even here. And it turns out it's something else totally unrelated that's bugging them. And then once they get that off their chest, then everything is cool again.
What do you think of the open office concept? Do you still think that works?
Yeah, you know what? It's funny. I get why people hate it so much now. After COVID, everything is probably going to change. But I think what happened is that companies like us that, are, I hate to say like sort of hip and cool, being who I am, but, it's a young, open culture. It's very social. Work is social. Again, they're like me. They don't differentiate, right? Like they'll go, let's go for lunch and talk about this new feature. But we'll go to a patio. I think it works for companies like us really, really, really well. And I mean, everyone always goes, well, it's to get your square footage to be cheaper, or you can allocate your space more efficiently because you can cram more people in. I'm like, yeah, that's totally true. That's absolutely right. Like we have 30 people in 5,000 feet. You can't do that if everyone has a private office. But we also do it because we're social creatures and we like the people we work with and we like the work we do. And where it goes wrong is big, stodgy old companies do it with people who've had corner offices for their whole lives and think that the status of having the corner office is part of their identity. And then you thrust them into the bullpen and they're like, well, I'm nobody anymore. I don't matter. I'm no more important than the rest of these peons, right? And you can't take a culture like that that's very sort of class-based and status-based and title-based and put them in an open office and make it work. But we started with an open office, and I don't know. I mean, never say never, but it totally works for us. When we first moved in here, we had bought SDMG back, the company that we're talking about. We had acquired it back, and we were merging two companies together that had met each other once for lunch in a new office that no one had ever been into on the same day. Like all the things you shouldn't do as far as like change management for an acquisition. And everybody was walking around going, oh, it's beautiful. There's so much sunlight. And it was like musical chairs. Everyone was walking around and no one would pick a spot. And then Eric and I kind of said, like, I was like, what are you guys doing? Like, pick a spot. And they were like, well, where are we supposed to sit? I'm like, that's the point of picking a spot, right? Like, pick a spot that you like. And they were all going, well, where are you sitting? And no one would pick a spot until they knew where I was sitting. And I said, fine, here, the seat by the door. I'll take the worst seat in the house. They were all waiting to see, well, I don't want to take the corner desk. Like, Eric might want that. Mike might want that. Caitlin might want that, right? Mm-hmm. And we were like, no, you guys sit here all day. We're on the road all day. We're out meeting clients all day. We're out of the country part of the time. Pick the seat that you want. And if you did that in a traditional company, people would lose their minds, right? It's like part of my identity is this. I have the 4x4 cubicle instead of the 1x1 or the 2x1, and I have the corner office versus the office with the middle office with no windows. And
but most people listening now, their office is their office home.
Yeah, totally. And I mean that's that whole hybrid thing. And I mean, there's huge companies that have said, we'll never go back. There's huge companies that have said it's optional to work at home for the rest of our lives. We're not gonna change this policy we have now. And there's other ones that are doing more of a hybrid model. And I like that, but again, I think a number of us. Nobody's required to come in right now. No one has been required to come in since COVID started, and still people come in, and it's a different mix
because they want to connect.
They like it, right? They like the office. Well, you've been to our office. Like it's not fancy, but it has a little bit of a mountain view. It's sunny all the way around. There's windows everywhere. I like coming in when I want to work, and I like working at home when I'm in the zone. But if I force myself to sit at home all the time, I'm just not that type of person. I like to come to a place where it's purpose built for work. But we're going to probably do the same thing, to be honest. We're probably just going to go, there's no such thing anymore as you have to be at this place or at that place. You just have to, we've always been results oriented. Like we use a task management system and we track output. So we don't care how many hours you work. We only care what you get done. but now we'll care even less about where you get it done. It's just not going to matter at all anymore.
Yeah, and that's probably going to be pretty common for a lot of businesses. When we had SDMG, we had quite the open concept, and I realize now for me to function, just if I'm doing design strategy or whatever, or I'm on the phone, as you know, I'm on the phone all the time, and I've realized now I need to have a quiet enclosed space, and I can just get in the zone. Because if I get interrupted, it's just hard to get in the flow of things, right? Especially when you're doing a lot of conversational stuff. So,
Totally.
I think everybody tries to figure out their magic spot,
Yeah, and it's self-policing. We have, like Ryan in our shop. He's has no bones about it. He's like, I'm not going to be in for 3 days. Like, this has to get done. I don't want to talk to any of you. Please don't take it personally. I don't want to hear from you at all. And that's completely fine, right? Like, we know that when because we don't care.
Because that's what he needs to get done.
Yeah, and we don't care that he's not available because he's basically taking care of the stuff that had to be taken care of, and we know we could reach him in an emergency, but we don't because that's the whole point of disappearing for a few days. So everybody just
that's my Fridays. I basically just allocate Fridays to my own projects. I basically Friday to Sunday I go in stealth, but I'm working. But I choose to do things like you and I doing this podcast. This will probably be the only thing I do. Otherwise, I'm like booting up my Final Cut. I'm doing some edits. I've got my own branding to do. So I just find that now I can kind of demand certain things where I'm going like, this is where I'm going to prioritize my own time and do it in big chunks of time. And, I think it works for me.
Oh, I mean, that's the biggest lesson for every company. I think it's not so much like, is it work at home, hybrid, open office, closed office? It's, are you allowing people to work the way that works for them? And
Right.
Are you measuring the right things? Like we've in our early days of this company, we had an employee who was above all others by far in hours that he put in. He worked way more hours than everyone else. And he was the least productive employee. And, when we started talking to him about how we were going to resolve this and how, we don't want you here long. We want you here, productive. And it turned out he just wasn't really, I think he wasn't really happy with his whole situation. And he was like using the office as an escape. So he wasn't really working. He was hiding, but he was hiding 12 hours a day. And so, he's making everybody else feel bad because they're starting to sort of compare themselves to him, but yet his output is not good. And, that's companies have to measure the right thing. It's all about what you get done. And I'm perfectly fine if someone's a superstar and they can get 8 hours worth of work done in 4 hours and go to a movie in the afternoon. I would rather have that than somebody who sits for 8 hours and it can't seem to get started and misfires. And, at the end of the day,
I love the people that are like lazy. Why? Because they demand more from themselves to figure out how to do it in the shortest amount of time. That's innovation. So they innovate. So if you give them the leeway, you're like, I'd rather reward the person that figure out how to do it smarter, because that's just going to help the whole business be smarter.
Yeah. And for like a company like what we do, like when you're doing B2B type software, your entire mission in life is eliminating that. It's eliminating the person who goes, I don't have time to do it better. I'm so busy doing it manual. All of these problems.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
You mean like a major retailer, largest, one of the oldest, not the oldest, and cards. Remember the person that we basically eliminated their job with the system because they would go into the safe. Like, do you remember this? And we're just we're looking at this entire process going, you could lose a high salary person and for a fraction of the price, this could be done forever. Like we killed a job that was the most useless job I think I've ever seen in my life.
Totally. And that's, in a business like ours, where you are in the business of optimizing processes and stuff, you have to be like, we are super careful not to say you can reduce headcount. What we say is you can redeploy those resources in a better way. And now whether that person stays or not is on them, right? Like it's, can they adapt to,
Did we use that thinking in that situation? I can't remember. It was a card system. They were doing all these things manually in out of the safe. Did we have the presence of mind to be that clever, or I don't even remember the situation?
Yeah, I think we always tried that. Like I said, it's not when your mandate is to, well, actually one of the things that, how you and I were so big on kind of these little quotes and idioms and stuff that we kind of defined what they mean. And one of the things I say here is we're out to make Iron Man, not Terminator. We're out to augment humans with technology, not replace them. Because the industry that we're in, I mean, the biggest fear in the workforce right now is being replaced by technology. And so, technology isn't good or evil. It's the application of it. And yeah, you could use our technology, I guess if you consider reducing headcount evil, you could use it for that. But the better way to do it is judge every individual team member and employee on their own merit, and then redeploy the ones that are great and maybe lose the ones that weren't so great. And it shouldn't be a technology decision. It should be a people decision. But we just make you better. Like we take 10 people and make them, as effective as 25 or 30 people. What you do with that, our theory is we'll help you redeploy them. We've got lots of training and lots of tools and lots of technology. Some people can't adapt, right? There's lots of coal miners waiting for coal to come back, and they don't want anything else. That's a job they want. They maybe lost it 10 years ago, but they're still waiting for it to come back. So the onus is on the company to give them opportunities to do something more high value, more high touch, and hopefully more fulfilling. But some people will embrace it and some people won't. That's how I reconcile it anyway. Like I'm not in the business of eliminating people. I'm in the business of making them better. And the people choose whether they want to perform at that new level, and whether they want to do higher value, more fulfilling work, or whether they will find something else,
What were some of the isms we did in SDMG?
Oh, there was so many.
I'm trying to remember. We had so many of them, and we really leaned into it because it was really about the DNA and the values that we had within the business. And I think of, one of them that's really driven me to write my book around Groundswell has been the experience we had where we saw HBC. I don't care about saying names. You work with them now, so maybe I'll edit that out.
No, I don't think it matters, unless it's about.
Okay. So no, it's not really, but we helped them. So basically we identified they were doing these full page, ads in trade publications, and seeing them spending the amount of money, which was, I think at the time was like 3 or 4 times what our retainer was, and they were scoffing. They were kind of like almost like pressuring us on a retainer. And we saw this one spend they're doing, and it was like, it's something about it really enraged me because we knew that was just wasting money, and then we finally convinced them to test and measure it, and that was how we grew the budget with them. Do you recall this?
Yeah. We had they were doing a lot of traditional, sort of more
brand ads.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That had no call to action, no measurement, no, all these things. So we had, so it was quite, they had that budget there. So the person was reluctant to redeploy this because like, oh my gosh, like we won't be in this trade magazine. We won't be visible and all this stuff. And for us to go through the journey and then showing them to redeploy in a more sustainable way, marketing, that experience is what I believe that is the genesis of sustainable growth marketing for me anyways, because just I've seen this repeat pattern of people wasting money, whether it's processes or different things, and they're not being resourceful and not looking at, that's easy to do. But if you do the hard thing, that's even a little bit hard, it's just a little bit harder than what you're doing, or more clever, or put some energy into it, it could be sustainable. And that's, to me, I think over and over again, my experience with SDMG is we demonstrate that repeatedly. I mean, that was like, I think about pound for pound, like we really deployed a lot of dollars. And, that's one thing I'm grateful for. And that's kind of what, really brings me to some of the things I learned by working together with you is that's really what's led to this whole, Groundswell.
Yeah. It was so much easier for us to come in from the outside and see their problems more clearly than they do. And, every time I get cocky and think how awesome I am because I helped so and so solve this problem, and then I'm like, oh yeah, but we do that ourselves, right? We just don't see it. It was like we're kind of like strategists and marketers and technologists, but also kind of sociologists that were studying their customers and the way they behave, and psychologists in terms of the change management side. And there was so much to coming in from the outside. And then also, companies like service businesses and suppliers like SDMG and like Ratik and like what you're doing now. We have this benefit of seeing, your problem isn't as unique and complicated as you think it is. There's also 18 other companies I'm working with right now that have their version. Like they're all unique, but they're all kind of this variations of the same theme. And so you have this benefit of having an agnostic sort of high level, like you're like the narrator of the book, right? Like you're everywhere. You see everything at all the time, and they don't have that, and they get really myopic. And that's kind of why companies like ours exist, is because left to their own devices, a lot of people on a team, especially the ones that have that mindset I mentioned in the first place, which is like, I just want to just do my job. I don't really care about the larger picture. I just want to do my job, go home, see my friends on the weekend, and go away for 2 or 3 weeks a year. And they have no vested interest in making anything better. And their entire livelihood is made up of manual, mundane, laborious, repetitive, redundant processes. And they're too busy to do anything better because they're too busy doing it wrong. And so you come in from the outside and you go, here's a way to fix it. And some people go, oh, thank you, this is awesome. And some people go, no, it doesn't need, we're too busy to fix it. There's this, there's that, there's two, and then they have a million reasons why they can't do it. That's those like resistors that you mentioned, right?
Or habit. Like they're in a habit. Like I know literally today, Jill bought a new Mac for me, and I'm already fretting about, I know that the minute I'm linked in, I'm going to be able to edit all the stuff I got to do. It's going to help me. It's going to accelerate. I'm excited about it. But I'm lamenting about the change of me uncoupling my process, the way that everything sits in my office is going to have to redone. And I'm like already kind of lamenting a little bit like, oh man, I got to do something new. I have to relearn, a few things. And I think that's sort of common for people in these processes, that they're just so habitual. Totally. That it's, even though it's a bad habit and they know it takes time, it's useless, and they hate it. It's like, they resist it because like, learning something new,
Yeah, and you need both types of people, no doubt. Like even in a single company, you've got to have both types because you have to have that stability. But like I am the opposite. I'm a burn everything to the ground and rethink it every 10 days guy. Like I'll tear something out that we just did if I think there's a better way to do it. But if it was all me, and we didn't have those stability people, we wouldn't have a stable platform. So you got to have both. You just got to figure out how to deal with each other and to make the stability people more comfortable with change and the change people more patient to have a bit more stability. Because my issue is impatience, right? I would do everything today, but the team will come back and go, yeah, we can do that, and then you risk introducing a bunch of fatal bugs and having issues with communications with clients. And I'm like, yep, fair enough, right? That's not my area of expertise, so I'll push the pace, and then you tell me when we have to slow down, and it balances itself out.
But you've burned things to the ground, start up, start over so many times. You have your own pattern of how to accelerate out of it, so you have less concern about it. No different than me looking at marketing campaigns and seeing the patterns and going, yeah, don't even worry about this. Like, well, even if it doesn't work, I know how we're going to be able to pick out 10 different options, because we've just been here, and that you can just like bounce back. But when people aren't used to change, rebuilding, and starting, they move more slowly, perhaps because they're just a little nervous about that. In the end of the day, it's like you're more elastic and more available to be, rapidly recover if you just learn how to fail fast.
Yeah,
that's the problem. I think people don't fail fast enough. They hang on to the failure, or they don't change quick enough.
Yeah, I forget. I don't know if that was you or somebody else, but someone told me sort of back in, like that 2007-8, retail meltdown, lots of cash flow issues, companies going to 180 days. And like lots of, personal stuff going on. That's probably like one of my lower sort of points. And I forget who told me
Yeah,
that.
I was deep in the dry storage because you and I we were
Yeah.
trying to hold on to our staff
Yeah.
and payroll, and we were not paying ourselves.
Yeah, it was, the darkest time. I wouldn't say it's a dark time because I don't think I've actually had one in my life, but it was probably one of the darker times.
Shades of gray.
Yeah. And somebody said to me, like, why are you so arrogant? And I was like, what? And they were like, you're not curing cancer. You're not doing brain surgery. Like, what is the worst that could happen? I'm like, well, you could lose the whole business. And they're like, yeah. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Right. Like, I'm not going to die. And I really changed my whole attitude after that to a lot of people sort of find right now when they first meet me now, they find me like nonchalant about things that I should be more worried about. But it isn't that I don't worry about them. It's just that it doesn't manifest. I don't find myself resourceful when I'm freaking out. But our new CFO, he was like, do you not worry about cash flow? Because I mean, from a CFO, if your CEO doesn't worry about cash flow, that's a bad sign. And he kind of said that to me when he first came in. He goes, you don't seem to get too riled about anything. And I'm like, yeah, I'm riled on the inside. And he's like, well, that's pretty commendable that you can look like you're not. And I'm like, well, I forced myself to do it, right? Like I might be, go out and sit in the car when I go to drive home and give myself a little pity party for 2 minutes and go, woe is me, my life sucks. And then 10 minutes later, I'm like, well, no one's digging me out of this hole, so I better just not do that. And I kind of find that's a huge part of it, is to not, to not worry. Like it's easier said than done, especially with so much, depression and everything in the world now. But it's, my kids have talked to me a lot before and go, well, that's you. Like I'm self-conscious and I'm worried about this, and I'm young and I haven't proven myself yet, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, if you think that any of us know what we're doing, you're sorely mistaken. Like there's no one on the planet who knows what the hell. I never know what I'm doing. I just like not knowing what I'm doing. Right. I thrive on it. I don't have it all together. My plan changes every day. People change it for me. Clients change it for me. Banks change it for me. Investors change it for me. The world, COVID, and all that stuff comes along and changes it for you. The trick is not to have it all together. The trick is to just relish not having it all together. Just
it's the mindset,
every day's a new adventure, right? It's like, that can't lose if you expect every day to throw something good or bad huge at you, then you can't really lose. But COVID's a great example of, I think I would be absolutely lying if I was like, oh, this COVID thing's not worrying me. I freaked out when we locked down, like freaked out. We had no idea what was going to happen. And I allowed myself to do that for probably the first weekend. And then I was like, okay, well, get back up and dust yourself off and figure out what we're going to do here. And ever since then, we've embraced the change, and we're finding clients who have an even more burning need to make big changes because of COVID. But, it would have been very easy to say, this is the end of everything. And I probably did. I'm sure I did that in my head for a day or two. And then I just went, well, I just always go back to that. No one's coming to save me.
Right. That's a good way to look at it, because then you put this responsibility on yourself. Like, I can say, totally the experience of spending the entire year being part of that Tony Robbins mastermind, I didn't blink. The stuff was going down. It was like the whole year prepared me for this. Like, if having Tony Robbins in my ear for so much, I literally was like, okay, here we go. Winter's here. Let's roll. I actually didn't have, I was not to say I wasn't concerned, but I was looking for the opportunity, and I've been thriving and busy. And I don't think change is going to end anytime soon. I think we're about to hit some acceleration with change, possibly more challenges with second waves, with economic, changes, with, support and different things that are going to change for businesses and for individuals, both in Canada and the United States. I think there's going to be even more change. And I'm just totally focused on the bigger the problem, the more opportunity there is. And the more you look at problems as gifts and how you can like, the universe, your God, or whatever you believe, or even if you don't, just got to believe that the bigger the problem means you're capable of handling it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah. And I tell lots of the younger team members that, like, think of any big, rich, sort of older money family that you can think of now, and not a Zuckerberg, but a Rockefeller,
Yeah.
and most of those groups made their money in some sort of crisis, either wartime, the Great Depression, Prohibition, some sort of crisis where that industry was going to collapse. And they took advantage of those opportunities. And like, we've got 3 companies talking to us now about being acquired by us, which is unusual for a company that is still, we're still definitely in startup phase. We're more mature, but we're still quite young. And lots of clients that are signing specifically because of COVID. They've come on trying to solve a challenge like you and I used to do that didn't exist in February. And now it has changed their entire world. And they're basically going, we're not thinking about this for 6 months. We need this 3 weeks from now. And it's really accelerated our sales cycle. So there are opportunities. I mean, I really feel for the businesses who,
Oh yeah. I mean, very empathetic to just the hardship that awaits a lot of people, and hopefully they can, I wouldn't say rebound, but hopefully can diversify,
Yeah.
because I think this is here to stay.
Yeah. And that's a lot of what we've been doing with clients, when we're sort of acting in the role of like consultant or therapist or whatever you want to call it, is how much of this is going to be temporary and how much is going to be permanent, and what is good about it. Like, what are the things there's a lot of things that you've had to do under duress temporarily to survive, and then there's a lot of things you had to do under duress that you should have been doing already, and there was just no burning need. And so it's separating out all those things, and then it's going like, let's put really lots of firepower towards accelerating the things you should have been doing already. That like contactless, paperless, cashless deliveries is all of a sudden the rage now. That probably should have been the rage 15 years ago, and it definitely should have been the rage 5 years ago. But COVID drove it to, it's something that we're thinking about, to something that it's an imperative for us to survive if there's another lockdown. So I think those things it's really interesting. Like, I've said to people, I'm a bit of a germaphobe anyway. I'm like, if I never can get on a plane again without wearing a mask, I'm okay with that. I wish people were wearing masks before, because I think I took 44 flights last year, and I don't think there was a flight. My brain might be exaggerating, but I don't think there was a single flight where I didn't get on and go, listen for a second and go, whew, I think I dodged a bullet. I don't hear any sick people. And all of a sudden it's cough, cough, sneeze, hack, sneeze, cough. And I'm like, oh man, I'm guaranteed I'm going to be sick. Like, by the time I get there, or by the time I get back, I'm going to be sick. And so those are kind of things that I'm like, you know what? Like, like you were saying before we started the podcast, like, there's things that you really want to go back to normal, and there are, but there's other things that, if wearing masks when you're sick becomes normal in Western culture, I'm cool with that. Because when I went to Hong Kong last year, there was police stopping people on the road that they saw cough and saying, put this mask on. And I was like, that's genius. Why do all the healthy people have to work around the person who's sneezing all over the train or something, right? Like, why have we not done that? So there's probably some really good things that will come out of this big change. And then there's other things that I hope go away.
Yeah. So I know that you're always thinking ahead. You're Mr. Futurist. And what do you think? What do you think the future holds? What are some of the innovations that you think are going to take hold that most people wouldn't expect?
Well, there's, all of this stuff that in our industry, there's all these alternative interfaces like voice, the personal assistants and the voice IOs like Alexa or Google Home or something like that, Siri and Cordana and all these kind of ones. There's AR, there's gesture based, like sort of the Connect style gestures and stuff like that. I think everybody's going to focus more on not touching things. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
almost a given. I think that new hybrid models of business models, like I mentioned to you that Rutique, our company, is taking this retail space in our building now to do this sort of hybrid delivery, picking retail food service model.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's really an experiment with us and our landlord, kind of in partnership, and they jumped at the chance. I just sort of threw it out there, and they jumped at it because they were going, the retail that we know as we know it is kind of dead. Like we just don't know if it will ever come back. You mentioned before we started again the whole trade show idea. Trade shows will never go away. They're really, trade shows and conferences and stuff are really important, but there's going to be some big changes, I think. You can't plan a trade show anymore the way you used to, where you're like, barring some kind of earthquake or natural disaster, this thing's going ahead 18 months from now. Now we don't know what's happening 18 days from now. So there's going to be virtual components of every show. There's going to be virtual backup plans. There's going to be a lot more contingencies for not being able to travel that, will have to be able to be put in place with a day's notice if another outbreak of something happens, right? So I think a lot of it is going to be focused on, modifying business models that need to survive, but literally can't survive the way they have been.
You're hitting it exactly where I think something is super important for business. The whole trying to have a contingency, and you know how there's like a physical COVID. I think it's possible for a meltdown like that to be digital, and businesses that rely on any one platform too much, that they could see their businesses completely melt. If, say, for example, there was like a digital COVID on Facebook, how many businesses would go under because they relied way too heavily on that platform?
Yeah,
more than people realize.
Well, supply chain, which is the business that we're in now, they're seeing that with routes to market, right? Like companies have consolidated. It's cheaper to really, sort of right size your supply chain and go to just in time delivery and have absolutely no inventory. And, a lot of companies really embrace that very, very well and created huge efficiencies. And then they have supply chains with a single point of failure that are just imminently disruptible. And we saw them all fail at the start of the COVID crisis. And so we almost saw like a return to the old school model and, less centralization, more distribution out to like sort of regional, smaller players and more routes to market, not one single, say, delivery company or something like that. But resiliency is a really big theme in supply chain. And it's the same whether it's physically moving product or digitally moving data. You have to have resiliency. You have to have failover plans, and you have to have some redundancy that can be kicked in. And you still want to optimize everything for peak operations, but you can't have everything optimized for everything always being peak, or the second it fails, everything falls apart. And that's a really big theme. I think that, the U.S. government, there's lots of evidence now that, they've been kind of thinking this was going to happen for a couple decades and had plans drawn up in some regard and had some money set aside. And, it was never a priority. And, and then all of a sudden it happened and proved that it can. And, you look at the way the world always works and you go, I hope we really learn from this, and this is the last time this will ever happen, and we'll always be ready for it. But then you go, reality will set in and go, some of it we will. And
we'll forget about it.
We're not going to see the next one coming any better than we did, right?
That's why I think the rise and fall of you're talking before about many businesses thrived in other downturns. In fact, you mentioned Zuckerberg. Actually, Facebook, Apple, they were born in a downturn. Mm-hmm. There's most of the best run companies have started during a downturn. They were founded during it. So I think that the fact that they built in chaos and they were able to be more resilient as a result when the growth opportunity happened, I think is something to be noted. But I even look at, businesses are going to get apathetic at some point when this, returns. But every time I think you and I have been through several downturns. And that to me is what, prior to the COVID, I've been telling businesses, hey, like Chicken Little, like you need to diversify. You need to think about if your leads, your business, and your customers are too heavily and easily found in one form or one place or whatever, and you don't try to stretch your muscles and diversify, you're totally vulnerable. And I think, I believe is like the next big vulnerability is going to be digital vulnerability.
Yeah, there's definitely, the COVID crisis has probably done a better job of exposing all these weaknesses in these sort of global systems better than anything else, really, because it's actually
Well, it's a global pandemic.
Yeah, and it's funny how it's brought out absolutely the best and the worst in everybody. Like it's pitted people against each other in the weirdest ways in some cases, and it's brought everyone together in other ways. I really find it funny how you watch movies like Day After Tomorrow. I don't know if you remember that one where like the world freezes over, and I think Dennis Quaid's in it and stuff like that. And he's lobbying the government and saying, there's evidence right here on this piece of paper. And they're going, oh, you're crazy. And you're thinking, well, stupid Hollywood, that would never happen. Right. And then you see it actually happening in real life. It's like a movie unfolding where some people immediately get the gravity of something and immediately start adapting. And other people go, the best way to deal with this is to just stick my head in the sand and pretend it isn't happening. And then you kind of get to watch that unfold and see which one, which model wins. I would always predict it's the one that adapts, but there's sure a lot of people out there that think that pretending something isn't happening is the best way to plan for it, right?
Mm-hmm. And do you know JP Sears?
Yeah, oh yeah, I've watched him when he was in Calgary here. I think you met him and did a podcast with him, didn't you?
Yeah, I know him really well. And he right now is getting censored. And he's talking about how the civil liberties in the United States are changing rapidly. And you're talking about people sitting by and hoping that's going to happen, or, not adapting and stuff. And I think, there's so many factors at play right now, political, legal, so many different things that are just changing. It's like going to be very interesting to see what comes on the other side of this. It's pretty fair to say, I'm not saying anything revolutionary going, this is going to be a lot different than 9/11. Like, it's obvious, but I'm just wondering what, is it Handmaid's Tale? Have you seen that? I don't know if you've seen that movie.
Yeah.
Is it going to be so crazy over time because change isn't slowing down right now. It's accelerating.
Yeah. And I've said that a bunch of times. Like, it's really the categories of, everybody wants to divide everybody by sex or gender or race or ethnic, religion or geography. The idea that you want to keep somebody out of a country because of the country they're from, or we need all of our resources for us and we don't. It just seems so ludicrous to me. But what really does divide people, I think, into the sort of haves and have-nots is the ones who embrace change and the ones who don't. And I really do think that, like, if you went back and you looked at the rise and fall of every society, including the historical ones and the ones that are rising or falling right now, you'd see that it's directly correlated to whether they're embracing change or fighting it. And there's countries around the world right now that are going, we got to get back to this. We got to go back to the old. We can't have this. We can't have all this change. We can't have all this new stuff. I want to protect my way of life and my values and my, traditional this. And to me, it's like it's directly correlated with a fall. Whereas the rising ones are the ones that are going, we have to rethink everything. We can't do anything the way that we did it unless that proves to be the best way once we test them. We have to test every assumption. We have to try new things. We have to, break some eggs. And those are the ones that are on the rise. And I think I've never done it. I'm not really a super history guy, but I bet you if you did, you'd go back to all these rises and falls and you'd go, if there was social media in the fall of all these different empires, from the Ottomans and the Romans and everybody, you'd probably see exactly that. I bet you would see the ones embracing change on the rise and the ones resisting it were falling.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And I think
Very interesting. So this is
the people and everyone.
Yeah, we've gone in the deep end, and it's like I just looked at the time here. It's been 2 hours and 20 minutes. We've been jamming. This is going to be the longest podcast, and probably the one that just went all over the place. Like we just went on a complete little conversation journey. But I feel like we could talk for like tons more. But in the interest of like our listeners, we might want to consider wrapping up on that note, maybe doing a second part, another 2-hour jam session another time or something.
Yeah, you know me, I love to talk, so.
Oh, no, and I'm enjoying it. Like I intentionally recorded this going, this just mean you catching up. There's so many different stories. If I was going to kind of like go, let's kind of just put a little like around our experiences, agency owners, SDMG, the marketing business, entrepreneur, being an entrepreneur, what would be like the top things that you and I felt like we learned from SDMG? Pushback was one. That was a really big, maneuver in terms of like a strategy, if you will. But, I think we've kind of stated a few, but is there any that come to you that are like, yeah, I really feel like, this is what I felt like I learned, or a lesson or something?
Yeah, we've kind of said the majority of it. I think to me, the biggest lesson is like maximum results with minimal effort. I'm not advocating minimal effort. I'm just advocating the minimal effort to get the maximum result, right? It's that ambitiously lazy. I use that phrase. I think we made that up. I've never heard anyone else say it.
I remember telling you it, and you're like, I love that.
I love it. I think it's just the greatest phrase ever. It's like, why do anything the hard way if you can do it the easy way, unless the hard way gets you a better result, right? Like, it's like, whatever gets you the result that you need, with the minimal amount of resistance. And then it just, to me, it's just like it has to be fun. Everything, barring some sort of tragic event, everything is supposed to be fun. Life is supposed to be fun. And if you're not doing it fun, you're not doing it right. And so then you got to re-examine why that is. And I think it goes back to point number one, which is like, minimum effort for maximum result. And, that's what entrepreneurs do. That's what people who sort of leverage, resources and the talent of other people. And, that the companies, the some amalgamation of everybody's effort, passion and talent. And if they don't have the passion or the effort, the talent doesn't matter. But you don't want the effort to be 20 hours a day. You want the effort to be smart effort, right? Like you always used to say, work smart, not hard, which I don't think we made up, but it's totally equally as.
No, we didn't.
Yeah, I mean, that's as true as it gets, right? It's like, why do something difficult? Why do it the hard way? Why continue to make it difficult for yourself when you could just make it easy? And why resist the chance to try that? And then, the other thing is the other common theme is just be willing to take calculated risks all the time. Always question everything and never do anything just because you've always done it, right?
On the opposite side of that, there's another side of the coin of like, keep it simple or minimum effort for maximum return is don't be afraid to do something hard if it makes a difference.
Yeah.
So like all those different campaigns, we put in a lot of extra effort, but it made the difference. And it's like so many people in business are going, well, what's the easiest thing to do? Sometimes it's the wrong answer. It's like you're thinking in the wrong direction. It's not what's easier. It's what could get me the maximum amount of outcome.
Yeah, and
work from there.
Those two pieces are so important, right? It's for the maximum result. So you don't put in maximum effort on a redundant paper process that could be eliminated 2 weeks from now by 2 weeks of hard work, and then do that for the next 4 years, right? Like that's exactly what I'm saying is like, if 2 weeks of hard work, focused effort will get you out of 2 years of hard labor doing crappy tasks, a lot of people's default setting is keep doing the crappy tasks. I don't want to take a risk. I don't want to do something different, and I don't want to spend the 2 weeks. So it's that, like, what's going to be the path to the least resistance to the best result. Let's just do that. And I think, everybody, people, countries, everybody that does that they're the ones that succeed.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, man. This was a good jam session. It's so nice to actually catch up with you, and then we just make it into a podcast. So it's like documenting what would have been and this is how you and I would have probably caught up anyways, just had a 2-hour chat. So
totally. That's how we do everything. It's just like, say what you think and then assume other people will want to hear it. Who knows? But I had a good time anyway. So that's what matters.
Likewise. Yeah. And I think people getting an insight on sort of like, even just like that was a pretty cool period of time working together. And then we're both doing different things, but a lot of things that we're doing now, or we're born and we learned and we kind of benefit from our experience working together over a decade. So that was awesome.
Totally. Yeah. No, anytime, man. We'll go for episode 2. 3.
Thanks, Mike. Well, how can people, if they're listening to this, I'll put in the show notes, but if they want to follow you or they want to catch up on these businesses you mentioned, what would you like to share?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if they can check us out, I'm easy to find on LinkedIn under Mike Allan, and the company name's Routique, which is a weird spelling. It's like ROUTE, the word root, and then IQUE. That's the logistics and supply chain platform. We have a couple of other companies as well in the power delivery side and that sort of thing. But yeah, and anyone who's that's my other mantra is I'll talk to anyone who wants to talk to me. So people can always reach out anytime on LinkedIn or via email or through the website, and I'll always hit them back.
Beauty. And I echo that. Everybody that's listening here, go to groundswell.fm. Someone just recently you just click a little button. There's a microphone there, and just talk to me. Tell me what you're thinking. What do you want me to talk about? What would you like to hear from? I ended up working with the person that talked to me and helping them out. So if you got a challenge, maybe I'll help you back with a voicemail back. It might give you some ideas. They seem pretty stoked about it. So anyways, thanks again for another episode of The Groundswell. And until next time, mahalo.